John Amos Comenius was a Czech philosopher, pedagogue and theologian from Margraviate of Moravia. He served as the last bishop of Unity of the Brethren and became a religious refugee and one of the earliest champions of universal education, a concept eventually set forth in his book Didactica Magna. He is considered the father of modern education. Comenius was the innovator who first introduced pictorial textbooks, written in native language instead of Latin, applied effective teaching based on the natural gradual growth from simple to more comprehensive concepts, supported lifelong learning and development of logical thinking by moving from dull memorization, presented and supported the idea of equal opportunity for impoverished children, opened doors to education for women, made instruction universal and practical. Besides his native Bohemian crown, he lived and worked in other regions of the Holy Roman Empire, and other countries: Sweden, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Transylvania, England, the Netherlands and Hungary. Life and work. John Amos Comenius originated from Margraviate of Moravia in the Bohemian Crown in Ústí Brodnivnice, or Komna, all of which are located in Ústí Radice district of today's Czech Republic. John Comenius was the youngest child and only son of Martin Kamensky and his wife Anna Shmelova. His grandfather, whose name was Jan Sigis, was of Hungarian origin. He started to use the surname Kamensky after leaving Komna to live in Ústí Brod. Martin and Anna Kamensky belonged to the Moravian Brethren, and Comenius later became one of the leaders of that pre-Reformation Protestant denomination. His parents and two of his four sisters died in 1604, and young John went to live with his aunt in Strasnice. Owing to his impoverished circumstances, he was unable to begin his formal education until late. He was 16 when he entered the Latin school in Přerov. He continued his studies in the Herborn Academy and the University of Heidelberg. In 1612 he read Forma Fraternitatis. Comenius was greatly influenced by the Irish Jesuit William Bathe as well as his teachers Johann Piscator, Heinrich Gutberlich, and particularly Heinrich Hallstatt. The Herborn school held the principle that every theory has to be functional in practical use, therefore it has to be didactic. In the course of his study he also became acquainted with the educational reforms of Raticius and with the report of these reforms issued by the universities of Jena and Gießen. Comenius' book Janua Linguarum Reservata brought him widespread prominence and fame. However, he and the Unity became special targets of the Counter-Reformation movement and were forced into exile even as his fame grew across Europe. Comenius became rector of a school in Přerov. In 1616 he was ordained into the ministry of the Moravian Brethren and 4 years later became pastor and rector at Fulnik, one of its most flourishing churches. Throughout his life this pastoral activity was his most immediate concern. In consequence of the religious wars he lost all his property and his writings in 1621 and 6 years later led the Brethren into exile when the Habsburg Counter-Reformation persecuted the Protestants in Bohemia. Comenius took refuge in Leszno in Poland, where he led the gymnasium and was given charge of the Bohemian and Moravian churches. In 1628 he corresponded with Johann Valentin Andrea. In 1638 Comenius responded to a request by the government of Sweden and travelled there to draw up a scheme for the management of the schools of that country, and in 1641 he responded to a request by the English Parliament and joined a commission that charged with the reform of the system of public education. The disturbed political condition of England interfered with the latter project, and so in 1642 he returned to Sweden to work with Queen Christina and the Chancellor Axel Oxenstierna on the task of reorganizing the Swedish schools. The same year he moved to Elblag in Poland, and in 1648 went to England with the aid of Samuel Hartleb, who came originally from Elblag. In 1650 Susanna Laurent-Fee, widow of George I Rakoczy, Prince of Transylvania, invited him to Sejrosbatic. Comenius remained there until 1654 as a professor at the First Hungarian Protestant College. He wrote some of his most important works there. Comenius returned to Lesna. During the Northern Wars in 1655, he declared his support for the Protestant side, for which Polish partisans burned his house, his manuscripts, and the school's printing press in 1656. From Lesna he took refuge in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where he died in 1670. For unclear reasons he was buried in Naarden, where visitors can see his grave in the mausoleum devoted to him. After his religious duties, Comenius's second great interest was in furthering the Baconian attempt at the organization of all human knowledge. He became one of the leaders in the encyclopedic Panoptic movement of the 17th century, and, in fact, was inclined to sacrifice his more practical educational interests and opportunities for these more imposing but somewhat visionary projects. In 1639, Comenius published his Pansophia Prodromus, and in the following year his English friend Hartleb published, without his consent, the plan of the Pansophic work as outlined by Comenius. The manuscript of Pansophia was destroyed in the burning of his home in Lesna in 1657. The Pansophic ideas find partial expression in the series of textbooks he produced from time to time. In these, he attempts to organize the entire field of human knowledge so as to bring it, in outline, within the grasp of every child. According to Cotton May, that Comenius was asked by Winthrop to be the president of Harvard University, this being more plausibly John Winthrop the younger than his father, since the junior Winthrop was in England, but Comenius moved to Sweden instead. Comenius also attempted to design a language in which false statements were inexpressible. A new Dutch translation of his Janua Linguarum Reserata by C. F. J. Antonides is available. Comenius produced a new edition of the 1618 Bohemian Brethren hymnal, Cantional, to Jesnifars Almu Episni Dukaunich, containing 606 texts and 406 tunes. In addition to revising the psalms and hymns, his revision greatly expanded the number of hymns and added a new introduction. This edition was reissued several times into the 19th century. His texts in Czech were notable poetic compositions, but he used tunes from other sources. He also edited the German hymnal Kirchen, Haus und Musica, which had been published under the title Kirchenger Sang since 1566. In other writings, Comenius addresses both instrumental and vocal music in many places, although he dedicated no treatise to the topic. Sometimes he follows the medieval mathematical conception of music, but in other places he links music with grammar, rhetoric, and politics. Musical practice, both instrumental and vocal, played an important role in his system of education. Educational influence. The most permanent influence exerted by Comenius was in practical educational work. Few men since his days have had a greater influence, though, for the greater part of the 18th century and the early part of the 19th, there was little recognition of his relationship to the current advance in educational thought and practice. The practical educational influence of Comenius was threefold. He was first a teacher and an organizer of schools, not only among his own people, but later in Sweden, and to a slight extent in Holland. In his Didactica Magna, he outlined a system of schools that is the exact counterpart of the existing American system of kindergarten, elementary school, secondary school, college, and university. In the second place, the influence of Comenius was in formulating the general theory of education. In this respect he is the forerunner of Rousseau, Pestalozzi, Froebel, etc., and is the first to formulate that idea of education according to nature, so influential during the latter part of the 18th and early part of the 19th century. The influence of Comenius on educational thought is comparable with that of his contemporaries, Bacon and Descartes, on science and philosophy. In fact, he was largely influenced by the thought of these two, and his importance is largely due to the fact that he first applied or attempted to apply in a systematic manner the principles of thought and of investigation, newly formulated by those philosophers, to the organization of education in all its aspects. The summary of this attempt is given in the Didactica Magna, completed about 1631, though not published until several years later. The third aspect of his educational influence was that on the subject matter and method of education, exerted through a series of textbooks of an entirely new nature. The first published of these was the Janua Linguarum Reserata, issued in 1631. This was followed later by a more elementary text, the Vestibulum, and a more advanced one, the Atrium, and other texts. In 1658 the Orbis Pictus was published, probably the most renowned and most widely circulated of school textbooks. It was also the first successful application of illustrations to the work of teaching, though not, as often stated, the first illustrated book for children. These texts were all based on the same fundamental ideas: learning foreign languages through the vernacular, obtaining ideas through objects rather than words, starting with objects most familiar to the child to introduce him to both the new language and the more remote world of objects, giving the child a comprehensive knowledge of his environment, physical and social, as well as instruction in religious, moral, and classical subjects, making this acquisition of a compendium of knowledge a pleasure rather than a task, and making instruction universal. While the formulation of many of these ideas is open to criticism from more recent points of view, and while the naturalistic conception of education is one based on crude analogies, the importance of the Comenian influence in education has been recognized since the middle of the 19th century. The educational writings of Comenius comprise more than 40 titles. In 1892 the 300th anniversary of Comenius was very generally celebrated by educators, and at the time the Comenian Society for the Study and Publication of his works was formed. Theology. As a theologian, Comenius was mystical, a believer in prophecies, dreams and revelations. He was greatly influenced by Bohm. In his Synopsis Physicae ad Lumen Divinum Reformati, Comenius gives a physical theory of his own, said to be taken from the Book of Genesis. He was also famous for his prophecies and the support he gave to visionaries. In his Lux in Tenebris he published the visions of Christopher Cotteris, Mikula Zdrabic and Kristina Poniatowska. Attempting to interpret the Book of Revelation, he promised the millennium in 1672, and guaranteed miraculous assistance to those who would undertake the destruction of the Pope and the House of Austria, even venturing to prophesy that Oliver Cromwell, Gustavus Adolphus, and George I Rakoczy, Prince of Transylvania, would perform the task. He also wrote to Louis XIV of France, informing him that the empire of the world should be his reward if he would overthrow the enemies of God. Family. One of his daughters, Elizabeth, married Peter Figulus from Jablonne nad Olasai. The son, Daniel Ernst Jablonski, Comenius's grandson, later went to Berlin in 1693, though he became the highest official pastor at the court of King Frederick I of Prussia. Though he became acquainted with Count Nikolaus Ludwig Zinzendorf. Zinzendorf was among the foremost successors to Comenius as a bishop in the renewed Moravian Brethren's Church. Legacy. The Comenius Medal, a UNESCO award award honoring outstanding achievements in the fields of education, research and innovation, commemorates Comenius. Peter Drucker hailed Comenius as the inventor of textbooks and primers. Czech Republic. During the 19th century Czech national revival, Czechs idealized Comenius as a symbol of the Czech nation. This image persists to the present day. Czech Republic celebrates the 28th of March, the birthday of Comenius, as Teachers' Day. University of Jan Amos Comenius has been founded in Prague. It offers bachelor's, master's and graduate degree programs. Gate to Languages, a project of lifelong education, taking place in the Czech Republic from October 2005 to June 2007 and aimed at language education of teachers, was named after his book Janua Linguam Reserata. Comenius is pictured on the 200 Czech koruna banknote. Other European. In 1919 Comenius University was founded by an active parliament in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia. It was the first university with courses in the Slovak language. In Szarospaty, Hungary, a teachers' college is named after him. Comenius. A name has been given to primary schools in several German cities, including Bonn, Grafing and Deggendorf. In Skopje, Republic of Macedonia, the Czechoslovak government built a school after a catastrophic 1963 earthquake and named it after Comenius. In Poland, the Comenius Foundation is a non-governmental organization dedicated to the provision of equal opportunities to children under 10 years of age. The Italian film director Roberto Rossellini took Comenius, and especially his theory of direct vision, as his model in the development of his didactic theories, which Rossellini hoped would usher the world into a utopian future. Comenius, a European Union school partnership program, takes its name from the Teacher of Nations. In the United Kingdom, the University of Sheffield's Western Bank Library holds the largest collection of Comenius manuscripts outside of the Czech Republic, USA. In 1892 Comenius Hall, the principal classroom and faculty office building on Moravian College's campus in Pennsylvania, was built. In 1892 educators in many places celebrated the 300th anniversary of Comenius, and at the time the Comenian Society for the Study and Publication of his works was formed. The Education Department at Salem College in North Carolina has an annual Comenius Symposium dedicated in his honor. The subjects usually deal with modern issues in education. The Comenius Foundation in the U.S., a non-profit 501 charity, uses film in documentary production to further faith, learning, and love. Works: Latin Orbis Pictus trilingual edition from 1669. Lingua Bohemica Thesaurus, hoc est lexicon plenissimium, Grammatica accurata, idiotismorum elegantiae emphases adagiac, 1612–1656. Problemata miscellanea, 1612, non-existent, perished in fire while being prepared for printing. Sillige Quaestionum Controversarum, 1613. Grammaticae Faciliorus Precepta, 1614–1616. Theatrum Universi Statis Rerum, 1616–1627. Centrum Securitatis, 1625. Moravia Nova e Post Omnis Priors Accuratissima Delineatio Auto Regia. Comenio, 1618–1627. Didactica Magna, 1633–1638. Vera Lucy, Vestigator and Amp Vestiganda, 1641. Janua e Lingvarum Reserate Aurea Vestibulum Quo Primus ad Latinam Aditus Tyrunculis Parature, multilingual edition from 1648. Schola Pansophica, 1650–1651. Primatia e Laborum Scholasticorum, 1650–1651. Opera Didactica Omnia, 1657. De bono unitatis ordinis, 1660, rerum humanarum emendatione consultatio catholica, 1666, unim necessarium, 1668, Spicelegium didacticum, 1680, Cecco Antelish, 1615, Retunc proti antichristius vodum Jeho, 1617, Ostaras idnostek Moravi, 1618–1621, Spizo rodus erotinus, 1618–1621, List of Ada Neba, 1619, Manuel Nicanor Jadras la Biblia Svate acute, 1620–1623, Primus Lavani Odokonolosti Krestanske, 1622, Nedabidalni Hradjmi acute eno hospidanovo name of the God, 1622. Truchlivi, Dilpi Rvni, 1623. Opo Aziseske, 1623–1626. Truchlivi, Dildruhai, 1624. Oserob, 1624. Presbozi, 1624. Vidinozia Veni Christopher Kotra, Saustra Gisher Sprot of Skevo, 1625. Prekladnektrix Zalmu, 1626. Didactica Seska, 1628–1630. Scola Hrou, 1630. Labyrinths Veteragesar DCE, 1631. Brana Jaziakuo Tevrena, 1631. Publications: Keating, The Great Didactic of Comenius. Kusera, Carol, 2014. Jan Amos Comenius, A Man in Search of Peace, Wisdom and Proverbs. Proceedings of the 7th Interdisciplinary Colloquium on Proverbs, November 2013, at Tavira, Portugal, ed. by Rui J. B. Swarzenauta Loikangas pp. 64–73. Tavira, Typographia Tavarensa, Simon Somerville Laurie, John Amos Comenius, Robert Herbert Quick, Essays on Educational Reformers. Müller ein Systematiker in der Pädagogik, eine philosophische historische Untersuchung. Inaugural Dissertation zur Erlangung der Doktorwürde an der Philosophischen Fakultät der Universität Jena. Lorscher Comenius, der Pädagoge und Bischof. Monroe, Will S. Comenius and the Beginning of Educational Reform. Web access. John Amos Comenius and his works.